Good morning, Commissioners. Paul Johnson, County Attorney's Office. The board directed staff to develop an ordinance and a process to assist with the recovery of or the resolution of wage disputes between employers and employees. Staff has drafted the attached ordinance for your consideration today. The ordinance does provide for a mediation process, a legal representation process, and an administrative hearing process or court action. This public hearing has been properly advertised, and a copy of the proposed ordinance has been filed with the clerk for public review. Staff recommends enactment of the ordinance as presented. This is a public hearing.
Thank you, Paul. This is public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this item? No one? We have a motion by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Beckner on item D1. Is there any further comments?
Commissioner, if I may, I would just ask the clerk's office to make sure that the materials submitted during public comment prior to the public hearing are included with this item.
Okay. I was concerned that two of our commissioners are not here today, as this has been a big item for us, a big item for discussion. And I do have a few questions of you, Paul. Tell me, could you just ask, as far as the staffing is concerned, what is the county going to actually be in charge of?
The county will be in charge of staffing and holding the administrative hearings. Staff will also be assisting the mediation program and Bay Area Legal if they take on the legal representation of the client.
So just to clarify on that, county employees will at times be potentially doing intake and sending that information over to the mediation program or to Bay Area as appropriate if someone does come to the county center, but the county employees won't be involved in the mediation or the representation.
So who's involved in the mediation?
The mediation will be court employees and their certified mediators that they already have in place, and then the legal representation will be done by Bay Area Legal Services. So they would be the ones involved in the substantive work, but we have not foreclosed the ability of Consumer Services, as may be needed, to provide forms basically for people to fill out, which would then be sent to the mediation program or Bay Area.
Okay, so I guess this question might be for Commissioner Beckner then. How is it that this is different than the original concept we first brought to us?
Well, actually, with staff, what we've worked out is that instead of this being handled in-house, we are utilizing existing resources with the area office of the court, which we're already paying for a branch that handles mediation. So that is actually being sent to them. So we will handle just the initial process of it so that we can manage the caseload, and that's sent over to them. And then they will handle the mediation portion of that. And then if that cannot be worked out, the Bay Area Legal Services would become involved. So what's different from what we brought before, we've actually taken a hybrid. We've taken the suggestions that Commissioner Chris had given, other commissioners have given about making up our own ordinance that actually, in my mind, I think creates quite a bit of efficiencies. Because unlike the pure models of each, where like the Palm Beach model, we would have a specific amount allocated for Bay Area Legal Services. Now, our estimate is about 70% of those cases will be able to resolve through mediation, which is already paid for. So we, I believe, have created a more efficient process. We are now handling independent contractors as well, which no other jurisdiction is doing. So I think we have created, at least on paper, the best of both worlds, which I think is going to save us money as well as provide a valuable service to the underserved.
So the actual hearing officer, or is that the entry point for the individual?
No, that's the last the
last
last
step.
option that they have in the event that the case can't be resolved through mediation. They would have the option to go to a hearing officer who would be appointed by the county, and county staff would be scheduling those hearings, but not involved in the adjudication of the hearing. So that would be a volunteer hearing officer like we have in code magistrate or child care licensing or those types of things.
So we're not introducing any, quote, burdensome regulation on our staff to implement this program.
The staff work in the classic sense that we think of is all being outsourced either to the court system or to Bay Area Legal Services.
So the person that is the entry point is gonna be here, where will that person be?
They'll have, consumer services may want to address it, but my understanding is what they've worked out with the various contractors is that they can, the employee, the citizen coming in with the issue can come to either consumer services or to the court mediation.
Okay. I mean, I'm still a little bit ambivalent about how this is gonna work out. Technically, I'd like for it to, be a pilot project, for a couple of years and have y'all come back to us and see how it works out. And I actually would like to, tell us, right now, are we approving the ordinance? Is that what we need to do?
So this is a little bit of a more complicated program because of the outsourcing.
Correct.
So there's essentially three main parts. What you all approved last time was essentially for us to proceed with contracting with Bay Area and an MOU, most likely with the court system on the mediation. That can happen without an ordinance. What's before you today is the ordinance that essentially establishes the hearing officer process. That's the key piece that we're doing here today. But it works with those two other contracts that were discussed last time and would come back to you all in the future.
And Commissioner Merman, just so you realize, one of the things that I built into this is to make sure there is an accountability measure, because anytime that we're doing something new, I think we need to be able to track the progress. We need to be able to make sure it's the most efficient resources, that the process is appropriate, especially since this has not been done in other counties. So I'm with you 104. There's going to be accountability, and there'll be reports that will be given back to us. So if we need to make tweaks, we can. What we want to make sure as a board is that we give this an opportunity to work, and that we're able to provide the best process for the people that need this service. And I know you've been a champion for the underprivileged and underserved, and that's what this is going to benefit. And if we need to make tweaks as we go along, I think we can do that. We just need a place to start, and I think this is a good place.
Well, I want to say I really appreciate your efforts on this, because it is needed. There's a lot of weaknesses in federal and state laws right now, and you know that. And by us doing this ordinance actually complicates that situation, because now everybody in every county or city in the state may all be doing different things. Actually, the state needs to just do something. I know Senator LaBella has said if Pinellas and Hillsborough do something, he's gonna be interested in maybe bringing something forward. I think it solves the problem for the people here, but I think there's gonna be confusion if these people go to other counties or other cities and expect to have that same service, and you know that. And I think that's maybe a consequence that's unintended, probably. And I mean, I'm gonna support it today. I'm not completely sold that this is the right approach to take. But if it's a hybrid and, you know, everyone's in agreement on this, I guess we'll just go forward and see how it works. I just think it's gonna be very burdensome for our small businesses. I know the Small Business Alliance was here, but I have talked to the state groups, and they're very concerned about us passing this ordinance, because again, small businesses that have branches in other counties and other cities, they will have different processes. and it does create confusion. I feel that we're complicating the situation and not really making better. I believe that whether the system is court-based or conciliation-based is important. I would prefer to be all court-based, just because they have a setup over at the court, and we could have just sent people over there. I guess technically you could say we're kind of doing that, but we could have eliminated the hearing officer here and just sent them right over there. You know, and maybe we can argue that don't stick the person in court right away because people don't want to be in court. Anyway, Commissioner Chris, your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can certainly understand what your concerns are. I had shared in those earlier on. But again, I'd like to, I said this before, I'll say it this time, thank Commissioner Beckner for his willingness to want to accommodate the concerns that I brought forward. I think that working with staff, we were able to find a logical way to satisfy both what you want to accomplish and the concerns that I had in looking at what you were trying to do and how we were trying to do it. So at this point, I'm willing to move forward with it and see how it would work. And you know, if there's glitches along the way, as sometimes there are, you know, we adjust and work with it.
Commissioner Beckner?
Thank you. And to respond to some of your comments, Commissioner Merman, you're absolutely right. It would be ideal if the state would take leadership to help resolve this serious issue. But as time and time again we have seen, when the legislature failed to act, we took steps to help and protect our own citizens. If you remember, we did that when we had the pill mills, and the state couldn't figure out what to do with all of these rogue pill mill clinics. We helped shut them down through an ordinance here. We did the same thing with PIP insurance fraud. When they refused to act or could not come to consensus, we took leadership and did that here. You remember the internet cafes, which I joined with you. The state couldn't come to consensus. We took action here. And is actually from our actions in some of those instances where the state did then finally respond with appropriate legislation. This, I think, is no different. We need to make sure that we take action to protect our vulnerable citizens here. I would respectfully disagree that putting this into the court would simplify things, it would complicate things. And I think by having this mechanism in place for small businesses, instead of having to spend an exorbitant amount of money on expensive, high-value attorneys, we're able to provide a simple process for them, a simple process for the employees to first help mediate and bring resolution before going into an expensive court process. And then again, like I said, 70% of those cases have been resolved that way. So, you know, like I said, of course anything could be tweaked down the road, and I think we just need to put our best efforts forward, give this a shot, and then improve it as we go along.
Okay. Commissioner White?
If this is approved today, when would we expect it to be fully functional, up and running, so to speak?
So we've already, based on the board's prior action, we've already started working with the Bay Area and the chief judge, and in those meetings we've anticipated probably a stand-up end of this calendar year, probably more likely early January by the time we get everything in place.
Okay. In listening to Commissioner Merman's concerns, and you know, I share those concerns, quite frankly. I think it's a good idea for this board to always have a practice of taking a look at new things as we implement them, to just make sure that they're going along as we expected. So I move to amend the motion such that we approve the draft, the item as presented today, but also schedule a report to come to this board January of 2017
Okay.
on the program. A
And-
report on the program.
Okay, there's a motion by Commissioner White to amend D1 and seconded by Commissioner Chris. Is there any further discussion on that? Please record your vote. And we are now back on
Motion carried 5-0.
the ordinance D1. Motion was by, I can't remember, Miller, seconded by Commissioner Beckner. Is there any further comment or debate? Seeing none, please record a vote.
Motion carried 5-0.
Well, next public hearing,